David, thank you for coming out today, man. I really appreciate you, taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're traveling around speaking at schools through your programs and speaking to churches and doing all kinds of things. When I heard you speak at. I want to get right to it because you have such a rich story and knowledge. So I want to get right to the point. I mean, just jump into it quick. I don't want to get on these semantics. Normally in the podcast, we kind of talk like, "Hey, what's up, man? And, how's it been?" And but I think that you have a very interesting and powerful life story about that speaks redemption, but not just redemption, but you've been through things, and when a person goes through things, they you got. I think you hit a crossroad when anyone goes through things. You could take the low road or you could take the high road. You could take the path of destruction, and I'm not just talking physically. I'm talking spiritually, or you could take the other way. And sometimes it's confusing. And I think that the path of destruction is actually an easier road to take. It's more enticing. Whether someone dives into alcohol, drugs, speak for myself, women, or whatever, or you could say, hey, do you know what? I want to become the type of person that I want to see in the world, or what's that saying? Become the change you want to see. So, can you please let's start at the beginning, or wherever you feel comfortable. Can you share your story? And because I heard you speak, and the way you spoke, I got to point this out. This is what brought David Anthony Johnson here. Is that why I invited him on the podcast, because he spoke actually at church. I went to a church out here in Laguna Hills, is it?
Laguna Niguel SDA Church.
Laguna Niguel SDA Church. And as you guys know, and you see on my social media, I hop around all kinds of churches. One day you'll see me at TD Jakes, and another time you'll see me here. I'm on a spiritual journey myself.
Amen.
But I heard you speak, and it resonated with me in so many levels. Like, you didn't just get up there and do the whole, you know what's so amazing about Jesus? He died for us. Think about that. There's these stereotypical cliches, but when you spoke, there was a realness to it. And you even talked about your life being threatened and being in situations where you could have lost your life, lost your career, and just in other things, and the way you were talking, I was like, he's been through some stuff. He knows. And so I think your story is worth getting out to the world. And so, can you please just and I'm gonna apologize in advance if while you're talking I might interject questions because but can you just start at the beginning or wherever the beginning is and just share with us your story?
Yes, it is indeed a pleasure to be on your show. I'm humbled to be here, and it's great to have met you at the church. And I believe that the Most High did not allow this to happen by accident, but by divine appointment for bringing us together at a time such as this. I am a fourth-generation Seventh-day Adventist Christian, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, from a single mother. My father was a Vietnam veteran who saw action. When he got out of Vietnam, he met my mother, who was a third-generation Adventist, connected to the church. My mother's mother, my grandmother, passed away when my mother was 9 years old. And so that caused a lot of problems with my mother, emotional problems with my mother. Issues and struggles that she had with relationships, as you could see, one would know, losing a mother, losing that nurturer. My grandfather was a stalwart in the church. When my grandmother died, he remarried. The lady was of French background. She was a black woman from Martinique, but from France, Martinique, France. And because of the culture and whatnot, her and my mother did not get along. My mother wanted she lost her mother. So it ended up happening where my grandfather put my mother out when she was a teenager. So she went to go live with my great-grandmother, her grandmother. She was more of the matriarch of our family, the one in which people who know me, Dave, how did you know the Martin Luther King speeches? It was this woman. This woman was basically the star in my life, was my great-grandmother. She was the daughter of a Tennessee slave. I get emotional sometimes because there's so much in my genesis, if you will. my father and my mother met when my father would visit my mother at church when my mother and her girlfriend was stealing away from the guys at the church to go through the back door of the church to the alley to find my mother's best friend's boyfriend, which soon became my uncle, and his brother, who's fresh from military service. So this was around 1966. They were together. So in 1968, my mother gets pregnant, and she tells my father that she's pregnant, and so he says, well, I guess we got to get married. So when he said it like that, my mother thought, well, you don't love me. He was just fresh from being divorced from his first wife, which is my oldest sister's mother. So my mother decided that she didn't want to be with a man who didn't love her. So he left. So a few months later, of course, I'm born, and she raises me. He knows I'm there. His first interaction with me when his brother gets killed, the same one that introduced her, he gets killed. Someone kills him because he's living that life. He was going to see me the day he got killed. He was out of the hospital from being stabbed 7 times. He went. He said, I'm going to go see my nephew. And that morning, he walked his dog. Somebody hit him with the car, drug him for about a mile, killed him. So the funeral service, I'm a couple weeks old. My father meets me for the first time, buys me Pampers. That was when they came home from the funeral. I was laying on his brother's stomach, his oldest brother, who just passed away 2 weeks ago. And that was the only time my father and I saw each other until I was 7 years old. So at 7 years old, my sister, who has a different father, but she's my sister, me and my mother were coming from my cousin's home. It was late at night. I can remember the ice cream man. If the Bum Pop man didn't get you in the daytime, in the evening, in the afternoon, the snow cone man would get you at night. So they're gonna get your money. So he was just coming on the street. It was around 9 o'clock at night, I guess it was. We're getting out of the car. My sister and I are sleepy because we just left my cousin's home, my aunt and my cousin's home. And as my mother walks up the steps, I can see it very clearly in my mind's eye. My sister's walking behind. I'm 7 and my sister's about 4. And we're going up the steps, 1976, 75, somewhere around there. And I could see it very clearly. We open up the gate. And as we're walking up, I look and I see a man that seemed to be black, a little bit of Asian. His eyes were very slant, freckles on his face, afro, lighter complexion, a lighter brown complexion, sideburns, 70s style sideburns that I donned when I was a correction officer. You know how the jeans are a funny thing. And he had a jacket on. And it was in the summertime, though. And I could remember him saying, Marilyn, Marilyn, to my mother. But being musical, there's a cadence, a musical intonation that when he spoke, it hit something deep down within me. I had not seen him before, except for I was a baby, but you don't remember that. But there was something in his voice that connected with that musical part of me. I knew he was my father. Marilyn, Marilyn. So I turned around and I looked at him. And when I looked at him, it was like looking at myself. And I looked and I saw he had this, this different look that the Warrens are known to have, and I said, excuse me, sir. And he looked at me, yes, little fella. I said, are you my father? I had never said that to any man before. My mother said, David, get up the steps. And I looked at him. He says, yes, I am your father. And I can remember fights. I was always fighting in school, was very good at it, loved to beat up the bullies. And that's a whole other story, while I even do anti-bullying in school. But I used to have to fight a lot the bigger kids, and I fought bigger kids. And they used to make fun of me. You ain't got no daddy. But in the urban neighborhoods, most of us didn't have daddies.
They said, neither is you.
Yeah, neither did you. But it bothered me that, those guys on my street, many of them had fathers, and I didn't know what a father did. And I used to say to my friend across the street, Kevin, who had a father, and they would go fishing because we had a lake not far from where we lived. In the hood, there was an inner city lake. And I would see them go fish together, see them work on the car together. Me and my other friends from the street who did not have dads, we'd say, so is that what a dad does? We didn't know. And so now I have one. And I tore through the steps, jumped down the steps, opened that gate, and ran to his arms. And he picked me up, and I just looked at his face. Looked at his little slant eyes that the kids used to make fun of me at, used to say, Dave got them slant eyes. So now I knew where it came from. My mother used to tell me that in Vietnam, they used to tell him, Jim, you better not get too close to the line with the Viet Cong because we might think you are one of them and shoot you. Yeah. So all those stories, now I'm able to put it together. And so I kept touching his face, and he looked at me. He said, I'm going to call you Little Jim. I said, no, my name is David. He said, can I call you Little Jim? Call me David. And he says, you got a firm mind, don't you? He says, man, you look just like I did when I was this age. My mom, before our house burned down, my mom had all the pictures. Merlin, this boy looks just like me. And she says, and what does that get him? So my sister runs over to him. Is that my father too? He says, I can be your dad. And she says, no, Cheryl, that's not your father. He says, oh, she's so cute, which she was. He picks her up. So he picks up the both of us. And he says, is this your little sister? I said, that's my sister, and I protect her from everybody. And he puts us down, and he tells me, son, tomorrow I'm going to take you to Ponderosa's restaurant. And that was a very popular steak restaurant. Even though we were Adventists and we grew up vegetarian, my mother gave me the green light to eat steak that day because I'm eating it with my father. And I said, and I was such a dramatic kid. And Mama, did you hear that? She says, Jimmy, don't tell my son stuff. He said, our son. Jimmy, don't tell my son stuff that you're not willing to do. No. I said, Dad, you going to take me? Dad. And I called him Dad right off because I had been waiting to call somebody Dad.
Yeah.
I'd seen too many of my friends say Dad. And I said, one day I hope that somebody will love me enough to be my dad. Now this is the one who I came from. And so he promised. He took out a silver dollar, tossed it up in the air, and I caught it. He gave me one and my sister one. He says, I'm going to pick you up from school. I'll pick you up at 4 o'clock. You be ready. He had a long Eldorado, and it was golden colored Eldorado with a T-top, I remember. 75, 76, somewhere around there. And I just watched him. And I said, can I walk you to the car? He says, come on, because he went upstairs, and he was just looking at my mother and talked about how pretty she was. And I just looked at her, and I couldn't stop staring at her. It was like you open up a present and you finally got, the Shogun Warriors that I used to have, or the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. I had one. Now I have a father. I didn't know what to do. I just stared at him. Wow. And then I just wanted to sit on his lap and just touch his face because if he left, I don't know if I'd see him again. So I didn't want him to leave. So I remember my eyes got water and I started to cry. And he said, son, I'm going to see you tomorrow. I said, okay, Dad. He said, so don't get in trouble. Your mother tells me you fight a lot at school. I said, yeah, but I fight the bad guys. He said, don't fight tomorrow. Be good. Clean up. I'm taking you to Ponderosa's. Oh, man, I was fit to be tied. I walked him to the car. When he drove off, as I always did, I would run because I watched a lot of $6 Million Man. So I pretend like I was running. And then he watched me all the way till we got to the stop sign of Lexington and Fair. And when he drove off, I was so happy I cried. I didn't know, 7 years old, why am I crying? I didn't know how emotional crying. I just knew crying if one of the big kids, 5 years older than me, hit me in the stomach real hard when we were boxing with the boxing glove, and I didn't want him to see me cry, and I go over to the side. Then I dry my eyes. I knew that kind of crying.
Yeah.
But I didn't know this emotional type of crying. And I just couldn't stop crying. And my mother said, David, I don't want you to take in too much because your father says things. Mama, no. So the next day at school, we would walk to school, 6 blocks, to the Adventist, Lexington Seventh-day Adventist School. I was in the 2nd grade. And I was in the 2nd grade. And I can remember when we walked to school, there was a dog that would come maybe two blocks before I actually got to the school, and he was set out, and he would chase us. And I felt so confident that when the dog came, I looked at the dog, and the dog, it was as if the dog said, he owns something today, I'll get you tomorrow. But right now, you own something, because I just felt so empowered because I belonged to somebody. I had a father, and the security that it gave me, I came from somebody. With my cousin Brian, it was my Uncle Bill that was sort of like a surrogate father / uncle to me. He was married to my aunt. He too was a Vietnam veteran. And this is, actually the war had just been over. So you had a lot of Vietnam veterans coming out of the war, trying to acclimate, especially black men, trying to acclimate to the U.S. life. And that was a very unpopular war. So they didn't get a lot of respect and honor. If you were white, if you were black, you got less. Yeah. So they're trying, and they had post-traumatic stress. They were dealing with all those problems. That's why my Uncle Bill and my aunt had a lot of issues and struggles, just like a lot of folk. But this man with anger issues because of his father beating his mother when he was little. Then he goes and he gets into it with his sergeant in and him and his white sergeant fought over racial issues in Vietnam. They had a lot of anger. The black men had a lot of anger, and you're still talking right at the end of the civil rights movement. So there's a lot going on with where black men were dealing with a lot of anger. Racism is still in the air. Now you coming from an unjust war that you were second-class citizen, but you were first class in terms of going over there and being drafted. So you come back with nothing. So my uncle helped to raise me. So when he would get mad, he'd tell us, get the gloves on. He'd hit us real hard. So he got us prepared for physicality. And I just saw how still Brian, my cousin Paul, even though that was Paul's stepfather, but my cousin Brian, that was his father, they had dads. I didn't. Now I got mine. So when school was out, people was trying to, the older kids, because I was never bullied, never messed with nobody younger. It was always the older kids, 2, 3, 4, 5, that I would try to, make sure to beat up those bullies who would be beating up the girls. And they would say, you ain't got no damn daddy. I said, I do have a father. Come on. And they would say, come on, I said, no, not today.
Not today.
Today, I'm going to see my father. Tomorrow, I got you. And they said, you ain't got. So I ran home from school. Dog didn't even worry about chasing me because I was on something. Got to school, got home, did something I never did. Went up and took a bath in the middle of the day. Got out, put on my basketball socks, my tube socks, and then my black church shoes, looking like Michael Jackson on a Beat It video, and had my high water jeans on, put on a nice shirt, had a nerve to get my uncle's Brute that was on his dresser, put it in and did it just like he did. Put it behind the ears, put it on spot, put on, like as he called it, some smell good. He never called it Brute, he called it some smell good. They put some smell good on. So I got it. I'm ready to roll. I sit on the porch and I'm waiting. Old lady that was the gossip. We call her the Big Bird, Aunt Bertha. She's sitting on the porch across the street. Everybody's looking at me like, what has gotten into David? He's usually running up and down the street, fighting and doing rough things. He's sitting down, acting nice, and I was just waiting. So the kids would come roller skating. We roller skated then until the street lights came on. So they're roller skating. What you doing, the older kids? I said, I'm waiting for my daddy. You ain't got no damn daddy. Tomorrow. Say that to me tomorrow. But today, I'm a peaceful man. You ain't no man either. You a little boy. I said, whatever it is, I'm peaceful today. And I just waited. looking down the street, waiting for that long golden El Dorado to turn on from Clay and make that left turn onto Lexington. And I waited. 3 o'clock came, and I knew 4 o'clock would be here, and I just was nervous. I saw the leather seats, and I thought, I'll sit right up there in the front. Maybe he'll let me sit in the front. And I was waiting and waiting. And my mother said, Dave, you want to come inside and eat? No, I'm going to Ponderosa's restaurant. And as we continued, 3:30 came, kids would come. My father wasn't there yet. 4 o'clock came, my father wasn't there. 4:10, 4:15, my great-grandmother said, Dave, come on in the house. And I said, no, mama, no. He said he would come, all the people on the street, even the big kids who would make fun, they saw this was even sad. They just, little man, you all right? It changed from you ain't got no to, because they could feel it. They knew this kind of pain. And that was something because it was an unspoken language that inner city black youth had. They knew, we know what it's like to not have a father. He was teased. He was tempted. He was given, the proverbial carrot and then pulled away. It had been better he had never been given the carrot at all. God ain't in my life. They all tried to make me feel better. I was crushed. Because it had been better had my father never showed up. But to show up and then to not show up. He left me on that porch. 7 years later, I graduate from, 8th grade, and I wanted to go to Broadview Academy in Chicago. But my mother couldn't afford the tuition to stay in the dormitories. She said, you need to contact your father. He's very wealthy. He's connected to construction companies. And he lives in University City, which is a very wealthy, well-to-do city, in those days, and it still is now. And not too many black folk lived in University City. And he had a home there. And here we were renting in an apartment, in a duplex in the inner city. And so there was no internet. There was no social media. So in order to get a hold of people, you had to go to the old white pages. And my mother said, you need to get a hold of my best friend, Larita, who introduced me to his brother, my former best friend. I said, well, how do I? So she lent to her phone book. So I'm going way back. She got out her phone book in her purse. This is Larita. You call her Aunt Larita because she's your aunt. And her daughter is your first cousin. So she's your aunt. So I said, okay. So I called her. I said, Aunt Larita, who's a seamstress. She's still alive. And her daughter, who's 6 months older than I, she just passed away. And I called her and I said, Aunt Larita, this is David. She says, I know who you are. You Jimmy's son. And she says, I said, I'm trying to find him. And she says, okay, well, if you do, just understand he's a sort of a scoffer, garrulous. He's a angry type of guy. So, and I don't want you to get your feelings hurt. I said, no, he left me on the porch 7 years ago, but I at least just want to get to know him if he wants to know me, and ask him why. She says, all right, well, here's the number, but don't say that I gave it to you. So I remember calling, and when he picked up the phone, the voice, again, it resonated. That musical part of me, it resonated, connected, and I knew that's my father. Hello? And I knew I wasn't going to call him Jimmy because I just was not raised that way, and I just, who I am, he's my father. And I said, Dad, who is this? I said, this is your son, David. Do you remember me? He was quiet. Of course I remember you, David. I said, I want to see you. When do you want to see me? So we set up the meeting to be at his mother's house. Incidentally, his mother lived 6 blocks from where I grew up.
Wow.
The public school that I went to before 2nd grade, when I went to the Adventist school, Farragut Public School, which was 3 blocks from my house, his mother lived 3 blocks from that school, 6 blocks from my house. They knew where I was. So I went over there, knocked on the door. It was really tough. You know, you're knocking on the door of people that know you, but you don't know them. They know you exist. You didn't really know they existed. Opened the door, and it was as if they were black Japanese, you know, just the look. I'm really.
Like a bunch of me's in here.
I mean, come on, man. I'm telling you, you look like some of my family members. And I'm looking. No wonder. You know, I'm thinking of all the jokes people when we be joning on each other. You slam-eyed, you know, all the jokes they used to say to me. Now I'm seeing it. And oh, wow. And they look at me, oh, my gosh, Mama. My aunt. She says, Mama, he looks just like Jimmy Lee. Oh, my gosh. And I never had that said, you know, and I walk in and they all, as if I was a conquering hero. And my aunt come and hug me. And then I have uncles that looked, just that look, that black Asian type of look, you know, and they just come and look at, eyes so slant, I didn't think they could see me, you know, and they coming on, what's up, man? One, you know, smelling like alcohol, and they hug me. And then my grandmother. And when I see her, cute little lady from Louisiana, and I hug her and kiss her, and she says, oh my gosh, she starts crying. You look just like your daddy, Jimmy Lee. And then I hug her, and she said, honey, Moses was her husband's name. And Moses Warren. And she said, Mose, come meet your grandson. And I couldn't stop crying. I just said, what is wrong with me? So the other day, you know?
Yeah.
It was like the faucets were on and the floods were coming. There was a deluge about to start. You know, I said, what is wrong with me? Remember, emotional sad I had never dealt with, you know?
It was an unfamiliar feeling.
It's unfamiliar. And he's from Mississippi, and she's from Louisiana. And I sit there, and then they get out all the albums, and then this little bitty girl who's 7 years old, the same age as I was when I met my father. So I start putting the math together. And see, my father was married at when he saw me at 7. She's 7. So his wife, as we found out later, was pregnant with her when he came over to see his ex, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
He wasn't really coming to see me. He was just coming to see his ex, okay? Mm-hmm. So she's 7, so I'm doing the math. And then I said, who are you? She jumps in my arms. Cutest little girl. Same phenotype, you know, like all of them. And I look at her, and it's like looking in the mirror, you know, and I grab her. And because she jumps in my arm, and then I said, you are really cute. Look at those cheeks. I'm kissing her on her cheeks. You're my big brother. And huh? You're my sister? I'm your sister. You're my big brother. I got a brother. Y'all, I got a brother. And I didn't know how to feel. And she's taking me by the hand, grabbing me, putting out these, and they all bring these albums, and I'm watching my father in these military outfits, you know, from Vietnam. And I said, You know, I'm meeting everyone. They're coming from downstairs, cousins and everyone. Oh, David is here. David is here. Some have even called me Jimmy Lee Jr. Then all of a sudden the doorbell rings. And my little sister races to the door. And my grandmother says, honey, I think that's your father. How do you feel? And my hand started to shake. Because I had anger. I had anger and sadness and joy all woven together. I didn't know what to feel. I had never felt this way before. I couldn't control myself like I've always prided myself on. Angry that he left me. Angry that he didn't love me enough to father me. Sad because how do you leave your kid on the porch? Just don't come at all, but don't do what you did. Then I wanted to see him. He's still my father. I still belong to somebody. So he knocked on the door. She comes. She said, Daddy, Daddy. And I couldn't see him because it was on the other side of the wall. And my heart is just as if it's getting ready to jump out of my chest. And I hear the walking. Doom, doom. And she come, Daddy, Daddy, come on, meet my brother, meet my brother. And when he comes over, what was an afro 7 years earlier is now a jerry curl. Mm. The eyes are still the same. Freckles still the same. Slightly lighter than myself. Big arms like Popeyes. Big old arms. Very good shape. Looked like, he could knock some things down, My mother used to tell me all these stories he used to do, And he looks at me. He takes off his sunglasses. How you doing, young man? And I stand up, and you could hear a hush in the house. My grandfather, my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my sister, they just looked at both of us. And they said, oh my gosh, he looks just like his daddy. Jimmy Lee, that's your boy. That's your boy, Jimmy Lee. He says, I know. And I didn't know what to do. Do I push him? Do I hug him? So I bowed my head, standing up at the table, and he's at the other end of the room. And as I just bowed my head and shook it, tears started to come. His mother said, hug him, Jimmy. Hug him. That is your boy. And he comes over, and as soon as he touched me, I grabbed him by the neck, and I broke down crying like a little baby. And he said, it's all right. It's all right. And my sister, what's wrong, brother? What's wrong? And I cried and cried. She could never know what that feels like. Even to this day, the issues that have happened, she could never know what that feels like. I cried because it was a cry of not being wanted, not somebody that's there. See, if they were never there, okay, but they're there. Their family lived 6 blocks from where you grew up. You were just not wanted. And that feeling was a feeling I knew it, but you could talk it out because you never saw them. Now that you see them and know they live 6 blocks from you, know where you were. I asked my grandmother, how come you never picked me up? Jimmy Lee and the family was scared of my father. Jimmy Lee never told me not to get involved. I said, but I'm still your grandson. And I asked my grandfather, well, when Jimmy Lee came back from the war, he was different. He was different. He was more surly, more angry, which typified most of the black men that came back. Men in general, but black men because of the racial element.
Yeah, my dad was like that.
Yep. Was he a Vietnam veteran?
Yeah, 3 tours, okay. 3 years.
See, we can speak the same language. They got something that we will never know. Yeah. And as I found out a few months later when I was staying at his house, I tried to wake him up. His friend called. He said, you little Jim? I said, yeah. Yeah, your dad told me about you. Put your dad on the phone. I'm his one of his military brothers. So my father's laying on his back, and I see his hairy chest. He laying on his back, and I said, Dad. And he's still asleep. Dad, I touched his chest, and he did one of them MMA moves I know you do. Tossed me over from one side of the bed to the other, to the floor. And just did some move. And then I said, and I started crying, 14. Dad, what's wrong? He said, son, don't ever grab me like that when I'm sleeping. I had a flashback. And I thought, to sum it up, my father and I had a tumultuous.
Wait, real quick, can I just say something
Sure.
to share with you? I don't start to interrupt your story.
Sure, not at all.
My dad, just two things about my dad. My dad, my dad left the house, when I was a kid too, right? But regarding Vietnam, my dad would sometimes wake up at night and like my mom would roll over, maybe kind of touch him, and he would grab her throat and start stabbing her, but he doesn't have a knife.
Right.
And he's stabbing her, and my mom would start screaming. He would have these crazy flashbacks.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up like that, because back then they called it shell shock, I think.
Yeah.
They didn't even know what PTSD was.
Yeah.
And my dad had all these weird quirks about him. But on top of that, Vietnam, I did some research on it years ago, because my sister's like my best friend, and we talk about stuff, that's going on, in our lives, when we evaluate, and I'm a very curious person by nature. So I looked into Vietnam, and, at the time, and I don't know if the numbers changed much, but African Americans make up, 10% of the population, 8%? But we're 30% of what was drafted, and that 30% was the majority of the front line. And and I found that weird, because even my dad had one time, my dad would never talk about Vietnam. He only talked about it once. No, maybe twice in my life. Scratch that. 3 times. He talked about it once, where that just openly one day he just said, like, he didn't understand why they sent him back, because you're only supposed to do one tour. He was in a helicopter that was shot down, and near the end of his tour. And he went, that's how he met my mother. He went to the Philippines. He first got medical treatment, then went to the Philippines for what they call R&R, rest and relaxation. Yeah. They sent him back for another tour. So he did a second tour, and then after the end of the second tour, they sent him back again. Like, he didn't even get a chance, like a little break, and went back. And, that's why my mother thought, this dude, he's not coming back to get me, because my dad always said, I'm going to come back and wait for me. I'll be back in 1 year. He was already gone 2 years, because he had to do another tour. That was one time he talked about. The other time is I grew up in Naples, Italy as a kid before I moved to the United States, and I remember my dad, this man came over, and at the time, when you're a kid, I'm a small person. I'm like 5'6". I like to say petite. Yeah, and my dad isn't big. I didn't get as tall as my dad, though. I took a lot of the Filipino genes. I think my dad's like 5'8", maybe 5'9".
Okay, my dad's like that. 5'8".
Yeah. But me, I'm just, Filipino side. My mom's 4'10", 4'11".
Okay, so you
yeah.
Yep.
And I remember this black man came into our home there. At the time, we had just moved, because back then the American dollar could go far.
Of course.
So we were initially, as a military family, my dad was a gunnery sergeant. At the time, we lived on a lake with a big 2-story house with a little beach on the side on military income. Like, you could live like that.
Wow.
But then there was an area like, hey, there's only a few military families that live there. We used to swim. It's called Parco Lago Iloca. If anyone lives in Naples, Italy, or is familiar, or Napoli, as the locals call it, we moved from there to a place called Pinatamari, which means like the place of the pine trees. And so, place of the pine tree, we lived right on the beach. And we had like a nice big condo. It was pretty sick. But we're living in the condo. This big black guy comes in. And I remember my dad started crying. I only see my dad cry like maybe I can't even count on one hand how many times he's cried. So I just got my dad cried and gave him a hug. This guy was the biggest, not just the biggest black man I'd ever seen. He's the biggest human up to that point I'd ever seen. And my dad was explaining to me what he was. This guy's a frogman. I go, what's a frogman? He goes, that's the special forces. And he's rare because he's a black special forces, you know, in the Marine Corps. And he's like, yeah, this guy scuba dives, he skydives, you know, he's like SEAL teams. He's like a SEAL, but the Marine Corps and the Marines, they're called recon rangers or frog. Well, Navy SEALs and Marines both call their special forces frogmen. That's like a slang. But their official name is Navy SEAL Force Recon. It's since changed to Recon Raiders, but it's called Force Recon. He was Force Recon. And he goes, you know what, remember I told you? Because my dad had to get knee surgery because of the helicopter accident. There was some metal in his leg because the helicopter got shot down. And he eventually had to get some metal removed from his leg years later as I was older. I don't remember Vietnam, but it worked its way up and he had to get the surgery. He goes, this man saved my life. And we sat down there and I was like, oh, and so I gave the guy a hug. And the guy sat down there and told a story. My dad and him were reminiscing on the helicopter accident. And they were saying that it was a high altitude flight. So they had strapped in and they had oxygen masks in a helicopter because it was so high. And they were going real high and somehow somebody shot them down. And he said it was spinning. So I just remember them saying it was spinning and it hit the ground. But as it's spinning so fast, your equilibrium, everything's thrown off, you know? He said they hit the thing, parts of it exploded, caught on fire. My dad had threw up into his oxygen mask and couldn't get out. He was so dizzy, he couldn't unstrap himself. This guy ran back into the helicopter, cut him out, threw him over his shoulder because my dad's small compared to this dude. Threw him over like a sack of potatoes and got out. And I was like, oh, he goes, you tell him thank you. You know, and I was
without that dude doing it, you wouldn't
I'll
be
be
here.
here. I was like, thank you for saving my dad's life. He's like, black men back then talk different. Yeah, young blood. You know, like
I remember. Very well.
they talked. Yeah, young blood, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. You know, like, oh yeah, this and that. But I didn't understand the magnitude of the bond. I could see that my dad got emotional, just cried a little bit.
Yeah.
It was within the same year. You might remember this. There was a Marine Corps barracks that was bombed in Beirut, Lebanon in the 80s. He was in there in that building and a truck full of explosives went through there, blew the building up, killed the guy that saved my dad's life that I just met.
Really?
And my dad, that's when first time I've ever seen my dad weep. He was like, oh, and just devastated. And my dad was calling his contacts. What happened? Where was he? What happened? Because they call it a barracks, but there's actually a medical unit on the first floor and on the lower level, like the basement. So they blew the hospital out of the dang place and the first floor. And he happened to be working on his car. Like, you know, you get these little beaters when you're out of the country. Right. He was working on his car as this guy drove in. He was near the front of the building. It just blew. It unidentifiable just blew him apart. Damage to him. And I was young, but it still resonated with me because I saw my dad break down like real hard. Of course. And he struggled. You know, I think it probably brought back Vietnam flashbacks.
Of course it did.
And my dad was real devastated from his friend passing away in Beirut. And the weird thing about it, I felt connected to it because I've met this man and the profoundness of what he meant to my dad, to my family, to all of us. You know, looking at my sister, you wouldn't be here either. Like, you know, we're just looking at each other. And
she's older?
She's older. She's 3 years older. Okay. And I remember we'd go to a base called NSA. My dad was stationed there. And wherever you have a Marine Corps, a Navy base, there's Marines there, always. Those two are together. You have a ship out in the ocean, Marines are on those ships. They're actually the fighting, traditionally, they're the ones when the Navy had ships, the Marines would be the ones if the ships rammed somebody. They're the ones jumping across, sword fighting, whatever. That's called leather necks. They used to wear leather on the neck, you know. And I remember we're at NSA and I would go there. My dad, they made us all go on base because I was in a military school. And at the military school, they started, like how people, let me explain something. I'm going to tie it into a few things here. But when we'd go to school, our buses were private contracted out to the Italians. We didn't have yellow school buses. Okay. So they're getting contractors by private owners. And so our school buses, Benzes, leathered, TVs. I didn't even know, like, when I came here, I was like, what the hell is this? You know, like, they would jack the buses up. When they'd come in, our school had a wall around it. Jack the bus up, checking under it for bombs. Of course. This is after the Beirut, Lebanon. And it was amazing because after 9/11, people complained about taking their shoes off. I felt safe in Beirut when they were, in Italy when they were checking everything. And they got to the point where we'd spend a lot of our time on the military base. And I remember there's a naval, because we're on a naval base, there's a naval hospital. The helicopters were just coming in, bringing in the wounded. They may be from Beirut, maybe flying them to Germany, or they just distribute them out to different locations. So the hospital is more busy than usual. It's like Loma Linda in the summertime. So I've seen my ex-wife is an emergency room physician, and I remember Loma Linda, man, sometimes in the summer, it'd be so busy because people get bit by snakes, car accidents. Yeah. There was helicopters landing on the lawn in the front.
That's right.
Yeah.
Rocking and rolling. That's right.
Yeah, they're just just trying to save lives. And but going back to all that stood out, and I remember the Marines on the base just getting amped, like, let's do something about this. Like, they're talking, they're yelling and getting worked up. And I remember they sent out, and this actually led to a lot of stuff. I was very in tune with the world because I lived it. My dad talked about it openly around us. This stuff, when it got like this part of history, the USS New Jersey, I don't know if you remember this, went off the coast of Lebanon and just unloaded. You could look it up online. There's footage of it. It aimed all its guns, and all of them, bah, bah, bah. I mean, it was fully auto. Boom, boom, boom. The ship was leaning, just letting off into that area, just to I don't know what the name of the terrorist organization. But years after that, you would see, especially on CNN, when CNN was the only 24-hour news source, when the terrorists would hijack planes and they would negotiate. They're like, because what you did in the USS New Jersey, and they remember they killed that American citizen that was a Navy guy. It's all tied to that time.
Okay.
And I knew as a kid because I was aware.
Okay.
And then fast forward, when I was my father, as I grew up and went through junior high and high school, especially high school, I used to tell people I didn't have a father because my dad abandoned us, me and my sister.
I'm sorry.
And my sister, I used to tell people I don't have a dad because I had the same problem that you had, and it hurts. When you're saying it resonated with me, it hurts. It hurts because it's unreciprocated love.
Of course.
And what makes the anger is that the anger comes from hurt.
Yeah, of course.
Why didn't you love me? What was defective in me?
Right.
What made me less than, like, say, the anyone else?
Right.
And when I finally spoke to my dad, my sister went out to the East Coast. I don't know if I told you this. Outside, my sister went out to the East Coast and tried to make peace with my dad. My sister's a peacemaker. She said, I'm going to go out there and try to talk to him because my dad had gotten out. My dad actually retired out of the military. The highest you could get is an enlisted. Like, it was an E9, E8, E9. He was a master gunnery sergeant, like the highest you could get. Full, what's it called, chevron on his arm. He was working in D.C., got out, was living there. So my sister said, I'm going to go there. My sister enrolled in Virginia Tech because she's engineering, but she didn't need there. Oh, he spoke there? Yeah, she didn't need any classes. She just wanted to make peace with my dad. She went out there, and my dad, and she's like, yeah, well, Junior. My sister calls me Junior. My dad calls me Bonsut. So does my mom call me Bonsut, which means the youngest in my mom's language.
Okay.
And it means the youngest but the favorite.
Okay.
Right?
Bonsut.
So Bonsut. And so my sister went over there, tried to make peace with them. And at the time, I had just learned about God, and I was actually doing prison ministry. Going out talking to, actually, first time I met an 18-year-old with life, and I was 18. I was barely over 18. I was like, bro, ooh, man, your life's just starting. And it was very humbling. Yeah. It's a deterrent.
Of course,
it's a deterrent.
Oh, it better be.
Yeah. And my dad was like, my sister was trying to make us make peace. She tried to make peace with him. And when my dad saw my sister step off the plane, we talk about this, what I'm about to tell you, at least, I would say once every 6 weeks, a few times a year, maybe once a month. She stepped off the plane, and where she landed, with the kind of plane she had, and some airports are like this, where you actually have to walk on the tarmac. Yeah. So she stepped off the plane, was walking on the tarmac. My dad saw her. It was so much guilt. He started holding his stomach and squirming, and he started crying. And my sister said, hey, Dad, you got to remember, he abandoned 2 kids. This girl raised me. I was 3 years younger. And she's about to graduate as a civil engineer. And she raised the younger brother, the kid that you abandoned. And my, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. That's right. Take your time, brother. Take your time.
Hold on a second. I mean,
normally
I could talk about this.
That's right.
It's probably because you're here.
That's right. That's right.
My sister said, my dad kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He said the guilt was so strong that he couldn't sit still.
Right.
He went to the house. She said he would sit on the couch. He couldn't sit still. The guilt was causing a physical manifestation that he actually tried to sit on the floor in front of the couch. And he would just roll on like he was hurting. And he said, I am so sorry. Couldn't look at he had so much shame. And my sister's like, don't worry about it, this and that. But it was weird because he had shame and he had anger. And I didn't understand this until like weeks later, because what happened was my sister would get us on the phone on a three-way and try to make peace with us. Because at that point, I hated my dad. And hate's a strong word, but I hated him because he didn't love me.
Right.
Or I felt that he didn't. I didn't understand. I don't know what it was, but I didn't feel love. I wasn't loved. I was left to the streets. And my sister was like on the phone, like, hey, my sister calls me Junior. Hey, Junior. My sister's been my business partner on stuff. We went to business meetings with corporations. And she's like, hey, Junior, calling me. I said, Audrey, call me by my name, man. We're in a business meeting. Don't be calling me Junior, dude. Right? Like she talks to me like I'm her little, like I'm that little kid still, but she kind of looks at me like I'm her kid.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
And so my dad got on the phone and he was like, you're weak. You're weak. And at this time, remember, I'm a former street criminal. I'm gonna be honest with you. Former street criminal, did every kind of thing you could think of in the streets. And I had a kid. And my dad went on me, called my son a bastard. You have a bastard child. Like he was projecting his onto me. Yeah. Guilty with my sister, projecting onto me. And goes, you are you're weak. You're
It's countertransference, we call it in chaplaincy. He's seeing in you, but really you are really him. So it's like him standing outside of himself. As he's talking to you, he's really talking to himself. Or what was said about him. So it's a countertransference.
Oh, is that what that is?
That's countertransference. Where he is projecting on you what has been told to him or how he feels about himself.
Oh, well, he went in on me. Well, he must feel bad. Well,
because my father does that. It's
he does
transference.
Okay, yeah, I didn't understand. I was just getting beat up.
Yeah.
And I told my sister, why do you call me with this dude on the phone? She didn't know he was going to do that.
Yeah.
And he went in on me and he says, you're weak. You're a pussy.
Yeah.
And he goes, and you believe in God? You're a guy. He goes, I got a problem with God.
Yeah.
And then my dad started like raging. God. He goes, that's why you're weak. Only the weak need God. And he said, he goes, isn't it weird? We have a lot of correlation.
My father used to say that.
Yeah, and he goes,
you want to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Maybe deep down, that's probably why I fight against it. He said, that's weak. Your mother and great-grandmother raised you to be a pastor.
Yeah, be a man.
Be an engineer.
Yeah, be a man. Yeah, you're weak. And he goes, I got a question. He goes, if there's a God, why did I see burning babies? Yeah. Why did I see children on fire? Because they use napalm.
Of course, napalm.
And he goes, if there's a God, like he was just raging. I couldn't reason with him. I could say, whoa. He was just yelling at me and talking about, you ever see a dead baby? I mean, a dead mother with the baby still holding her baby. The baby's alive, and like you just and he just cussed me out. I got off the phone, and I was like, look, but at this time I was right with the Lord. I didn't backslide yet, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go. I said, Audrey, don't have this dude call me anymore. Don't call me anymore. I don't have a father, and literally. That day, I got off the phone with him. I had to go to this prison and talk to other people. But, I was in a good place spiritually and mentally. A few days later, I get a phone call. I'm dating myself. We're from the same generation. You had to pay for caller ID.
Of course.
So we didn't pay for it. So phone call, it's a gamble. Like, I pick it up.
Who can it be?
Yeah, who can it be? I pick it up, and it's just weeping on the other line. I said, hello. And this time, he started calling me Junior. Yeah. Junior, I'm sorry. Yes. I am so sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry. I hurt so much. I am so sorry. He just kept saying he's sorry. And he goes, I'm in so much pain. Yeah. I'm in so much pain. I'm sorry for leaving you. It's the biggest mistake of my life. I'm sorry. There's nothing I could say to make it right. There's nothing I could do at this point. And I said, Dad, listen. And he went in and just broke down, and he was a broken man at this point, completely broke. And I told him, I forgive him. I said, Dad, I'd be a hypocrite to not forgive you because I've done bad things myself. I've done things that are unspeakable to other people. And God has forgiven me for these things. And like I should be in jail, you know what I'm saying? And in hell at the same time. Let's go to the next level, in the lower level. And I said, God has forgiven me and this and that. And he just kept crying to me. It was like almost like how someone cries at a funeral.
Of course. And
I said, but I'm at peace, Dad. I'll come see you, and we can, we'll see where it goes, you know, because I've seen other stories. You know, when you do, at the time I wasn't a minister, but I did a lot of Bible work, which is ministry. I see situations that you think are going to go well, but they don't.
Right.
So I keep that door open. I'm like, it's up to God. So I said, let's see where it goes. I don't want to get all hyped up and then go back and he flips on me. So I was like, let's see where it goes and this and that. And he goes, why are you so peaceful about this? You're just so quick to forgive me after what I've done to you and what I said to you. And I said, because God forgave me. And I'm not just saying that God forgave me. He truly forgave me. Like the karma from those things don't follow me. I have peace and this and that. And he goes, I need peace. I can't sleep. He goes, I've killed people. And I can see their faces. And they haunt me when I close my eyes at night. He's talking about Vietnam. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. He goes, I could see them. Yeah. You know, I killed a lot of people, Junior. And they haunt me. There's certain people's faces that I'm seeing them die. And I said, Dad, what you need to do is you need to accept Jesus. And that's the first step. God will do the rest. He goes, how do you do that? And so I did this, you know, what's it called? They call it now the sinner's prayer, or I accept Jesus, Lord and Savior. You know, I walked him through that on the phone, and we prayed, and he cried again. We actually both cried. I'm not gonna lie. We both cried at this point. I said, Dad, things are gonna change. I started calling him Dad. Dad, things are gonna change in your life. Things are gonna be good. I'm gonna figure out a way. I'm gonna come out there. I had connections. I could get out there. I'm gonna come out there. And he said, okay. And he got off the phone. I went back to my girlfriend's house, who later became my wife, now ex-wife. I went to her house and I told her what happened. She goes, you okay? And I go, yeah, I'm okay. I could go see him. And she was okay. So I actually, when I flew to the prison, flew back, her house was by the airport. So I would crash. You know, her family is very conservative. So I had to sleep in my own quarters. Security measures are in place. Dog was in the living room. Just keeping an eye on me.
Man,
it will go, you know,
just
like,
in case.
just in case, brother. Keep your hands to yourself.
That's right.
And so, sleep in the living room. I get a phone call at her house from my mom. My mom never calls her house. And I said, yeah, Mom. A phone call.
And your mom your mom is alive at this time?
My mom's alive. She lives with me. She's disabled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your mom is alive now?
Yeah, she lives with me.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you about my mom.
Okay.
But my dad, I got a call from my mom and says, Audrey says, call her. So I call my sister. This is like 3 a.m. I call my sister, what's up? She goes, Junior, Dad died. I said, what? This is just days after. Dad died. He had a heart attack. And my sister started crying. I didn't even cry. I didn't yet. She goes, you okay? I didn't know how to feel.
Right.
This man, we just made peace, but I don't even have memories. You know what I'm saying? Like, the last memory I was a kid. And so I was like, okay, all right, well, are you okay? And she goes, yeah, I'm going to go down. My sister's hardcore. I'm going to go down. He wanted to be cremated. So I'm going to go down there and hit the lever and put him in. I said, you want to do that? And she did, actually. She went down there, kissed him. And my dad's sister flew out there. And, you know, you can have the option to do it. They'll let you do it. She did it. And the way I know she did it, too, is because...
Where were you guys? Where?
I was in California. I was in Bakersfield.
Okay. And
she was in Virginia.
And your dad was in Virginia? Yeah,
he was in Virginia. And then they had like a funeral, a little memorial thing there, but they were going to have the main funeral out here. But my sister, she didn't tell this because she didn't want to hurt my mother's feelings. My mom was not going to hear this podcast. They had, because my dad was so decorated that they gave him full military honors. That like full Arlington Cemetery honors. And plus he served 27 years. Wow. 27 years. He lifed it in there. And so when I came back, just on a side note, I went on vacation. I went on a little honeymoon with my wife. We had gotten married, but I used my sister's camera. She already had some photos, back in the day. Well, I already got 12 pictures on here, but there's like 13 left, and then you change the roll. Man. So I went and put it like at Walmart or Rite Aid, and like you go through, and I was like, oh, look at this. Boom. There's a picture of my sister there with my dad about to go into the crematorium. To the burner. I was like, it made me so sick. That's fast forward, but that's why I knew my sister did it. I said, I don't know what's wrong with my sister, dude. My sister, like, she's the kind of person, I don't know, she's made of steel. And so
she's married and she has kids.
She has married. She has 2 kids now. Wow. She didn't get married till she was like in her 40s.
Wow.
She was just.
Was she 50 now?
Yeah, she's 50 now.
Okay.
50, maybe. I don't know, because if she hears this, 50-ish. I don't know, maybe 50 or 51.
Okay.
But going back, they flew back, man, and I remember we had a funeral there, and my aunt wanted to do it in her church, and it's in the hood, and it's in the neighborhood where I used to run the streets. So, you got a lot of people who there's no internet back then.
Right.
They've never even seen a Marine, right? Dude, they gave them full military honors there. Have you ever been to a military funeral?
Mm-hmm.
They'll bring out like a veterans,
right,
or even a recording.
Mm-hmm.
No, active duty, everything. They brought the Marine Corps showed up and showed out. They showed up with the flags, the guys with the staff. They set up a thing, and I remember when I walked in, I didn't even cry to this point.
Right.
I walked in and I saw a picture, like a memorial of my dad's ashes. It was a picture of his uniform, and it was a picture of me in a Marine uniform. When I was younger in school,
right,
and with him, and the 10-year-old me, the kid, I felt like a kid crying. I wept for him. You know what I'm saying? And we had the funeral service. I was crying and crying, and they let us select a song to play in the church, but don't make it secular. Right, of course. And so my sister's like, and we're not religious,
right?
And I was new. I'm talking fresh new.
Right.
So I couldn't even tell. Like, I remember, song Father Abraham. I remember going to church, helping out with the kids stuff. I didn't even know the songs. And they were like, you don't know this song? I was like, no, I don't know none of this stuff. So my sister was like asking her Christian friend, hey, what's a good song? I said, you know what? I played the Marine Corps anthem for them because this is what I know. This is what I want. And they better not say anything because this is not a secular song.
Right.
And these guys fought for freedom.
Right.
So you have this church here.
All right.
And so they played that. And we went outside, and they had the 21 gun salute, all the guns, and boom, boom, and I remember that was the only time in my life outside when I was a kid, I felt proud of my dad. Yeah. I said, you know what? I'm glad, even though he's damaged, right, I'm damaged from it. I felt proud. The neighborhood came out when they saw these Marines. You had black, Hispanic, white Marines, and they're like. These dudes come out pants sagging and, hey, cuz, what's going on? Right.
It's in Bakersfield.
Yeah, because Bakersfield was like the Lancaster before Lancaster, where you had the people overflowing or moving out of the hood. Right. So and then they'll bring their man and their bad kids, and they're the gangs there. Yeah. And so.
Like Moreno Valley.
Yeah, Moreno Valley. Yes. Yes.
After the LA riot.
Dude.
They all moved to Moreno
when I
Valley.
taught Moreno Valley, I had a girl.
You knew, so you know about.
I had a girl, her parents were crippin', still crippin' in Moreno Valley. Her name, Cash Money. I am not making that up. Her name, I said, your parents named you Cash Money? She said, yeah. We're going to need to talk.
She go.
No, but not Money.
Right.
Cash Monet. Like slang. Yeah. Yeah, but the cash is spelled Cash. It was hyphen.
She's going to have a lot of couch time.
Yeah. I said, you need a nickname.
Oh,
and so, but going back, and one thing too, one of my other students, her dad was the lead singer of Troop. Troop lead singer. She's still my friend on social media. She's the lead singer of Troop.
Ego tripping.
I said, girl, listen.
I'm not soup.
Yeah. I said, tell your dad I've sinned so much to his music, girl.
All I do is think of
day and night. That's all I do.
I'm not soup.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I said, what? That's a group you wonder, like, why were you not bigger?
That's right.
But going back to the funeral, to wrap up that story, I'm sorry to get caught up in my story.
That was wonderful, man.
But when my dad, the thing that stood out with me, because I've been to funerals, military funerals.
Right.
No, I've never been to a military funeral. I've seen them on TV. They had a live bugler, young dude, active duty, playing taps. Da, da, da. I didn't know this. Taps is go to sleep. It's the lullaby that mothers sing to their kids. Go to sleep. Go. Yeah, they just say.
Yeah,
they just
string it
say.
out a little bit.
They just call it taps.
Right.
You know, yeah, but it's go to sleep. They're saying it because you're resting.
Because you're resting.
Yeah,
wow,
it's like,
didn't know that.
So we're like, duh, duh, duh. I'm telling you, the whole neighborhood was around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the whole neighborhood was around the church. I'm talking. People were looking and this and that. As he plays, duh, 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 you could hear about a half a mile away or a few blocks, another live bugler down the street, full uniform, to create the echo that you'd get in the valley.
Of course. No,
and I was like, whoa, man. And then that brought to a tear to my eye. The guy gave my mother the rounds that they shot from the 21 gun salute and the flag. And my mom's hardcore. My mom in that whole time, this whole scenario, she maybe cried for like 2 minutes and wiped. Because my mom has her story of abuse in the Philippines. And she's like a shell of a person, you know, like when it comes to emotion. Right. And but yeah, man, that was like a very transitional. Like I didn't get a chance to hug my dad and tell him, but I did one, and this was a concern that a lot of my family had, because at the time I had other people in my family come to Jesus, you know, or become Christians. Right. And they were like, man, he was so lost. You know, my dad would cuss out God and cuss them out and stuff. And I go, no, he accepted Jesus. Yeah. He go, when? I told him the story. And I go, we'll see him again, and I'll get to hug him in a new body. That's right. But that's right. He accepted Jesus in this and that. I remember my aunt was like, "Thank God, thank you, Lord," because she was so worried. He was so destroyed from Vietnam. The type bring it all back, and I really think that Vietnam played a role, of course, in his decisions in life. Of course, you know, and it a lot of men, they never left Vietnam. Of course. Even though they're walking around Vietnam, because I know that my dad was in one of those groups that came back as a group in uniform and got spit on by whatever, and then my dad had to because the first thing he did was go see his cousin, and who I met, and she shared the story with my sister. Then she was a college student, and he said, "Hey, pull over, let me stop somewhere at a gas station, take my uniform off." He was greeted with shame because not only did he spit on, he was called the N-word. Yeah. And it was just, you just had 3 years of PTSD and murdering and whatever.
And then
you don't get a hero's outcome. You get the opposite. Right. Oh, and by the way, some of your veteran benefits, you're not getting them. That happened too. Oh, so, but let's continue with you. I apologize. I kind of got caught up in the moment.
That goes with everything. And as we're speaking, that's a powerful story that needs to be in a book, and it needs to be heard. It needs to be heard, even for your healing. Yeah. And what you saw is what we're being trained on as chaplains. That was when we write our case studies. That was countertransference. He was projecting onto you his pain, what he felt either of himself or what others have told him that he is. So he projected that on you. And we study that countertransference.
Countertransference.
Yeah, look it up.
I'm gonna study
exactly
that.
What he felt. There's transference, where you're transferring. Say you were going to counseling, and you transfer some of your feelings on that of your counselor. That's transference. You know, you're looking at your counselor is telling you things, and you're telling the counselor things, but you're feeling like the issues or struggles that you're going through. You're projecting them onto your counselor is normal transference. But when the counselor then starts to look at the client or the patient, and they're putting their issues and struggles onto the patient, that's the countertransference, and that's.
You just made a connection in my mind just now, and I got to say this because I know different people listen to this podcast, and I got to say this. There was a woman in my life that I dated for 6 years after my divorce. She has a heart of gold, you know, but she's the kind of woman that whoever she's with, she becomes. So that I'm in the martial arts, she became in the martial arts, if I was a drug addict, God forbid, she might be influenced because she loves completely, and there's an innocence to her love, and she trusts you. And I think that I'll say I can't say her name. I don't want to put her on blast, but there's a nickname I used to call her that she'll know, and it's Stimpy. And I used to do, she didn't like it, but it's Stimpy. You ever see that cartoon Ren and Stimpy?
Ren
back
and
then?
Stimpy, yeah.
And that little dog would get mad and say, "Stimpy, you idiot." Yeah. So I used to call her Stimpy sometimes. That's my way of cussing at her. Stimpy.
Yeah.
She's like, "Don't you call me that." Right? But Stimpy. I did that countertransference of my childhood abuse and the pain from what I just shared with you in all these years. I transferred it onto her. And I recognize it now. And when you're saying, I didn't know how to word that. And you just introduced that to me. And I actually contacted her when I went through this, let's call it the fire. And I was refined in the fire, which brought me in an inception of this podcast that created this whole thing. I actually wrote her and apologized to her, a long letter of apology. And I broke down, I was such a bad influence on her. And now I understand what you're saying, the countertransference, because, and that's why I can't judge my dad.
Right.
I've seen violence, but he's seen more violence than I've seen. And I can see and I've experienced violence, physical upon myself, and I've executed violence on people. So, but I definitely countertransferred.
Yeah.
I countertransferred it to her, and I treated her poorly, very bad. And I feel bad about that. So if you're listening, Stimpy, again, I'm sorry. And I wish I could make it right. I told her, I said, I wish, if I could take a time machine, I wish that you would have never have met me, at least not at that point. I told her that. She actually wrote me back and was like, thank you, because I wanted to give her closure and peace. Because when you countertransfer like that, until you look inward and do the work,
that's it.
You're standing on what you said to them and how you treat them. Well, look what they did to me. Or blah, 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 blah. I'm not saying Stimpy was perfect. Obviously, no one's perfect. But I knew better. You know what I'm saying? And I...